When I was 16, Cal Newport and I started a business together. That experience is really life-changing.
I read that led to over 7 figures.
It's definitely smaller revenue-wise, but higher profit-wise.
Do you love the book Deep Work from Cal Newport? Then you're gonna love Cal's high school friend and writing business partner, Michael Simmons. Thought leader Michael has built multiple 7-figure businesses. Through mental models, he learned how to think clearly and strategically to boost his productivity. He became famous for the 5-hour rule Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Oprah use, got featured in Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and Time magazine. Want to make good decisions and become a more strategic thinker and writer? Steal 7 genius mental models from $1 Million writer Simmons. I check your Substack. I guess this is now your home on the internet. And there you say that you are a writer, a connector, and a social entrepreneur. You say that you help thought leaders create blockbuster content in order to build their business, become a recognized expert, and change the world. Did I miss anything here? What would you like to add?
That's a good place to start. I've been just a more internal biography, the kind you'd write for how you see yourself, is that, when I was 16, Cal Newport and I started a business together, and we didn't know anything. So I realized and discovered books that you could spend $10 to $15 and get someone's years of experience condensed. It just felt like the best offer ever. So I just got the bug, and I was like, anything I want to learn. So I just learned about architecture, how to play better tennis, gardening, meditation, yoga, topography. Kind of just started really, really reading. And after a certain point, as you're reading more, you start to realize things that are valuable that other people don't. And I realized that when I shared what I was learning with other people, I enjoyed that, and they got value from it, and actually learned what I was learning about at a deeper level. It helped me organize my thinking. So we started the business at 16. Then I started journaling literally every day for an hour when I was 18 and have kept that up. And then started writing articles maybe a year or after that. Wrote a book when I was 21. And so I kind of always been love learning. And then that leads to sharing, which leads to me sharing about thought leadership and so on, and being an entrepreneur.
Wow.
As well.
And when did this whole journey started with Newport? How old was you and how old were Newport?
We were both 16 in high school.
I see. So you met in high school, and now he's this famous guy, and you are famous as well. So this is how this whole story started?
Yeah, I think I actually just interviewed him on my newsletter, and I think that's a transformative experience for both of us to, be learning about business together, and it's this world outside of school, and we're both at the time still inside, we can put on a face, but slightly socially awkward, where maybe certain things that are obvious to others weren't obvious to us. So we just had a lot of conversations, just trying to figure out stuff. And I think that's sort of learning plus trying to figure out stuff and make sense about it and sharing it, that we've just each carried that with us.
Wow. And this is how you met. And so you were friends then and somehow became business partners.
Exactly. Yeah, we became really good friends in not grade school, in middle school.
So you were 16 when this all started, and then could you, set the scene a bit and show us this journey from this 16-year-old boy to now a 40-something, am I right? 40-something Michael Simmons that is famous and has more than 100K subscribers and everything, and is, on X and Medium and YouTube and has his own community and everything.
I think there's the things that are in the bio. Those are so far downstream, and they're handpicked on the highlights. When I look at myself at a fundamental level, I think what drives everything is I'm a very curious person. I just like novelty, and I love being in the dark and trying to find my way home in a way. It's uncomfortable, but just in a lot of different domains, I just see myself gravitate towards that. Even to the point I remember I was walking in high school, where I'd go out in the woods and just walk for hours, but it'd be complete dark. Not the safest thing. And we're in pine trees, so you can't actually literally see anything. It's pitch black, but I said my dog. And for some reason, I like that. Most people would not like that. So I think that exploration And I kind of just trying to figure out life in a way. Why are we here? I just felt like it was really weird that, well, I think one transformative experience is my dad died when I was 8 years old. So I kind of had this awakening of like, okay, wow, life can be, it's not necessarily going to be a fairy tale. And like, it could end, I could die at any moment. So I was like, why isn't anyone, like, no one knows? He asked people, like, no one knows, why are we here? Or like, what are we doing? We're just on this planet. And maybe for others is in the background. For me, that was in the foreground. And so everything I've done in some ways has actually been remarkably consistent to that. And I've just, okay, well, as an adult, how do you, it evolves that you certain things you figure out, your curiosity evolves, you can hold more of the world's complexity and nuances in your head, and then just trying to share the journey.
In the milestones, Michael, could you elaborate more on these milestones, from 16 to 40 now?
Internal milestones or external milestones?
We could talk about the external milestones, the ones we see, and then the internal milestones as well, how they are combined, not like in, I don't know, 1997, this happened, just
Right.
to
Yeah, I
let
understand.
us in, and tell us a bit more about who you are.
I'd say I had my first published article when I was 20, then published a book at 21, a self-published book, and it sold about 10,000 copies.
And this
And
first published article, was this in a national newspaper or online magazine?
it was in something called College Bound, which is just a student newspaper. So that was a big step. Wrote the book, and then started to get invited to speak from there. And started to, I think my first event was in an area called Elko, Nevada, and I was paid $2,500 to give a speech. And like I grew up in kind of like near Princeton, New Jersey. It's close to New York City. Or Elko, Nevada, like I remember flying there and reading that 90% of the students in the high school class were going to go into like mining or something. So I was just like, okay, what am I going to say? My wife and I, after we graduated, created an events conferences on entrepreneurship on college campuses. So we did over 450 conferences where we bought this 32-foot RV, wrapped it, and went all across the country and actually world. I think we did events eventually in 7 different countries. So that was more entrepreneurial. We did a showcase of the country's top young entrepreneurs at the White House and United Nations, and also did a really big. I was even surprised. We did a conference at the several congressmen, a governor, senators, heads of major foundations, university presidents, billionaire entrepreneurs at when we were before turning 30. I think it's definitely in my 20s much more achievement oriented, and I'd say turning 30s, I just questioned. I had all these goals of achievements, and then like I liked achieving, but at the same time, I felt like a certain emptiness of that frame of achievement. I think I'm 42 now, but became much more internally referenced. I switched to full-time writing in 2013 after starting with Forbes, and found this approach of writing articles that I call the blockbuster approach from Anita Albersi, that rather than writing, how can I get stuff out, stay top of mind, focusing on quality. And immediately I found my average Forbes article was getting 50 times the reach of the average Forbes article just using that approach. Even though I was spending 30 hours on each article, I felt like, oh, it's still worth it. And I really enjoyed really taking an approach where I actually don't even know what I'm going to write about. It's just starting with a curiosity and a desire to learn about a topic, and then sharing my journey after I get a big aha.
And Michael, going back to your first story you wrote for this high school magazine, what was the story about back then, and how long did it take to write this one compared to your Forbes articles, which took like 30 hours or more?
I don't remember. It was a little long ago how long it took me, but my focus then was just more pragmatic. Like, okay, 800 words. Let me just get the 800 words out there, review it once or twice. There's more sharing what I know. And I was sharing, it's like, well, what can a 19-year-old, 20-year-old write about? But, you do understand young people if you're young. And I had a perspective on entrepreneurship. So I was more sharing my entrepreneurial journey.
And then when you started writing for Forbes, did you apply for Forbes, or did they approach you and said, "Hi, Michael, we know what you're doing. Why not become a writer for us?"
Forbes is going through a transition. of just taking journalists as writers and paying them to basically having experts who may not be journalists, but they are an expert in an area and having them write. And so I think at the time they had like 1,200 columnists, and I was one of them.
And which topic then? Entrepreneurship?
I had a little bit of latitude. So at the time I was an entrepreneur. I was getting a little bit burned out of that business. So I kind of just tried to write about whatever I was interested. I did one on entrepreneurship education, one on work balance, because I had a 3 and 5 year old. Yeah, 3 and 5 year old at that point, and it was just kind of getting burned out just in general because I was like trying to be super achiever and be super parent. And I wrote a few of those, but then I was like, oh, I don't want to. I started to get more balanced, and it's like I don't really want to write about this for years. And then I started writing about relationship building, and I did that for 2 years. And that really kept, there's this field of network science that had emerged previously. To understand dynamics of personal networks, you had to survey people, but now because of social media, there's a lot of insights. So I enjoyed that of just how do you build authentic relationships with people in a professional context. Then it switched to learning in 2015.
And then I know that you not only wrote for Forbes, but also for all these other incredible magazines. Did this also happen back then, or did it happen then when you started, writing about learning more about learning?
Yeah, it started then. So right away, the Forbes article started doing pretty well. There's another writer, James Clear, who at the time of the blog, I met him at a conference, and I saw that he was taking a lot of his articles on his personal blog and then syndicating them on like 20 different websites. So I started doing the same. I found out that a lot of different publications like time.com or World Economic Forum or other places were actually looking for content as well. And because I'd spent so much time on my content, it was pretty high quality. And so when they syndicated it, it actually did well for them as well. So I was able to get a lot to do that. I posted on Forbes. You had to wait 5 days, and then I could post it anywhere else.
And did you tweak your stories then, or was it like the same you had already published with Forbes?
It was the exact same article.
And I know that you got covered in like Time and Fortune, Forbes, Entrepreneur, HBR, so many amazing media outlets with tens of millions of views. And how did this make you feel? Did you feel like somehow famous or so? Because if you say, well, I know Newport, this is how my whole story started. And then here we have James Clear, I met him during a conference. It's like, wow,
I feel like in my 20s, I was really focused on like, how could I won like the Inc. 30 under 30, Business Week 25 under 25, and like getting my name. I wanted to get like each publication name so that I could have the bio. And I think that is value. That kind of stuff does change the perception of it. People definitely treat you differently. And so, which is nice. I feel like people are more open to listening to your perspective. But I think the biggest thing is, for me, that I got the most joy from was because I had burned out, I really chose a process that I loved, that creation process that I loved. So I look forward to every article. I only clicked publish when I was most proud. And that felt really good. And it felt really good that feel like the writing was resonating, because in the past I'd write an article and then you could see the views, but you couldn't really see, it wasn't like going super viral or anything. And I didn't really get many comments. So I was like, is this really impacting people? Is it worth putting the extra time? But I think it was really cool to see that the extra time I put into quality, people would say, this is the best article I've ever read on Forbes or in the past year. I read all of your posts. Those kind of things feel the best.
Michael, how do you define quality then? Was it a lot of research, so you learned a lot, and then taught people about it? Or does quality mean for you?
That's a really good question, because that has evolved a lot for me over time. But one way that I like of defining it is aiming to do your best work that you can do. I think a lot of times when people publish online, it's just not their best work. And so that you're capable of. But if you aim your quality bar too high and say, okay, quality is like Elizabeth Gilbert or Malcolm Gladwell, then you're just never going to publish anything. So having the bar that it's something that you're really proud about and that you really tried to make it your best. So I think there's a difference between writing for efficiency, where it's like, okay, I got to write a post, it's on my content calendar, I'm gonna get it out, versus when you try to write your best post, you're going to really be deliberate around, okay, I just created titles, but like I'm gonna create 30 titles, and I'm gonna really think about, okay, well, is there something I can improve at with titles, or something I can improve at with editing? So every post, you're actually getting better improvement wise, and therefore your quality bar keeps on increasing.
Hey, it's Christina. Do you want to meet Michael Simmons live? Then join my online writing club. You can meet every inspiring writer I interview inside my membership. Was it the same back then that you also like spent hours, like 30 hours? This is like a full-time job. Was this still something that happened on Medium, and now with Substack that you spent so many hours on writing this? Or did this improve over time so that you became, someone who could write faster?
I think quality is important. If it's not high quality, it's not going to rise above the zeitgeist and be
a German word,
get found out. Yeah. So one way to get to there is just to iterate, get a little bit better each article, but not go super crazy on trying to do your best work each time. And so Cole has definitely gone that way. I mean, I interviewed him a few years ago, and before actually started Ship 30 for 30, and he had written like 2,000 articles about like gaming, and he's one of the top, I think, World of Warcraft players. So it's like he iterated for a really long time. I think the average person, they're just getting started and iterating. It's just because you're improving slower, it's going to take a long time. What I like about the approach of trying to do your best work and fewer is actually very few people are actually trying to write one of the best articles that's ever been written on a topic. And so there's not actually a lot of competition, even in crowded spaces, for the best online. And that's actually not like that in most media industries. Like the bar for what does it take to create a blockbuster movie is probably like you got to get Liam Hemsworth or famous actor or actress in there and pay huge amounts of money and get the top script writers in the world. To do the same with TV or books is harder. With articles, even though it's more crowded in terms of quantity, it's not crowded in terms of quality. Also, just to close the loop on what is quality, a lot depends on for whom, so getting clear on your target market and what is quality for them. And so you could actually have something that's maybe low quality in some areas, like craft. It's not the best written thing, but it's really solving a problem for people. So that's just something to consider, that it's actually, once you break down quality, it can mean a lot of different things. And so, and it is possible, therefore, to get sometimes, if you hit the right zeitgeist in that, then something lower quality craft that you didn't spend a huge amount of time on, it's just resonating deeply, that it makes up for that lower quality there. And in terms of my evolution, I started with 30 hours, and then I was like, okay, well, what if I improved in two ways? What if I actually spent 60 hours per article? And then, and I also really deliberately put a huge amount of time into getting better. So I'm going to publish a lot less, but it's going to be really resonate. And I feel like that really worked with Medium. Medium's algorithm really rewarded how much time people spend actually reading the article. And since my words were 2,000 to 3,000 articles were 2,000 to 3,000 words long, and then eventually more, my average article on Substack, on Medium probably has like 20,000 plus claps over time, which I think is pretty unique on Substack, or on Medium. I think that shifted around 2022. You've probably heard this in so many people who write for Substack now who used to be on Medium, is that they really made big changes to the algorithm. They went from algorithmic to human curation. And I just found that my writing just didn't do as well with the human curators. And I kind of pulled away a little bit from writing there, because that was one of the reasons I pulled away from writing for Forbes or other places, even though I was getting traffic. Actually, an editor come to Forbes, I built up my voice. I was getting a lot of traction on Forbes. And then a new editor came in and he said he wanted to write with he wanted all his writers to write with a certain voice that was different than mine. And I realized I didn't want to write for editors. I wanted to really hone my voice based on the audience. And, and I feel like every publication is entitled to have their own voice, but just wanted to be mindful. And I like the freedom. And I don't even want to be nudged in small ways to alter my voice away from the readers. And so
Yeah.
Substack is new for me, and I like testing my assumptions. So I like testing my assumptions. And then actually I had a bad experience in 2022 where I kind of went so far on the quality side, I became perfectionist. And there's an article I spent like 500 hours researching, and then I was like, became like almost like a mini book and then a series. And it didn't do particularly well. Like some of the articles did well, but it's like, okay, I think I went too far. Like I read a whole book about the history of electricity in the US because it fit into this, like things like that. And so this year I've just been experimenting. I've been on Substack for about a year, and I've been experimenting with, okay, I have a lot of skills now. What if I focus a lot more on efficiency part of it? Because efficiency is valuable if you can write faster. So I've been doing that, and I think I'm still able to write at a high quality in less time because I built up all this knowledge and skills. But it's not my very best work if I were spending 60 hours per week and doing all the research. And I'm actually going to, I think, switch back to like more time per article. I just like the feeling of taking my time, getting lots of perspectives, really challenging my perspectives, my premises, getting feedback from more people, and so on.
Do you now feel, let's say, more like healthy writing on Substack now? And does it feel as if you could share your voice more openly and that you are more you?
Yeah. I actually just wrote a post on this today that Marshall McLuhan had the famous message, a medium is the message. And so I was kind of saying that was 1964. Fast forward 60 years, that today the incentive is the message. So I was saying I like to maximize for my own freedom and creativity. And so I was feeling restricted by an editor. And I think algorithms can constrain or empower you as well. And I think one thing I can say now after having written on lots of different platforms is that sometimes if you're writing in a certain context, it's like you just get in the more is better context, like more views. And so you don't want to maybe target your niche as much because that will hurt your views. Where I think Substack is interesting because with the paid model, I think it incentivizes you, number one, to be different. Because whereas for likes, a lot of people, social media posts look the same because they're all copying the same meme templates and same repurposing the same graphics in slightly different ways to get, and it does work. It's if you want a reliable way to copy what's been viral, copy what's been viral. Where when it's paid, I've done it. Going to come out soon, but collaborated with Alina Okun, who's another Substack writer, to survey some of the top writers on Substack, and we got about 45 responses from people over 1,000 paid subscribers. And one of the big things was originality. Like they are focusing on, they're just different. They're providing something that you can't get anywhere else. So I like that Substack, just by the incentives, encourages you to be yourself, like really embrace your own differences. And number one, and then number two, kind of helps you to really think about, rather than trying to be for everyone, who are you most for, who resonates with you the most, so much that they'd be willing to pay, and focus on depth in that way.
If I remember this correctly, was that you told me that you were broke. Is this correct? So somehow was this with being this entrepreneur, or did this happen, in another year? I'm not sure about that, but
I think we were just focused a lot on revenue or the size, that top line item, versus paying ourselves in profit. You're just like, all right, we're going to grow bigger and bigger. Okay, we're taking on this debt because it's going to pay off in this amount of time. And so that we grew to over $1 million and somewhat profitable. And then I kind of went through a period where I started to burn out, but I didn't know how to identify or recognize it. I think because that never really happened to me. So I think we could, I think each person a little bit had that in the company. And so we became a little less excited, less hardworking, less like charismatic when we're speaking, things like that, doing sales calls. Just my 20s, it's mentioned, like a little, definitely more achievement oriented. So one of the achievements, so it's like there's this awards you want to win, get listed certain places. And for whatever reason, like a lot of my friends were other young entrepreneurs, it just felt like $1 million was a big milestone as an entrepreneur to reach. And so that was kind of focused more on, it's kind of like people who are writers being like, okay, I want to reach 1,000 followers. If I reach that point, that will mean everything. But followers is not necessarily equal to 1,000 paying subscribers. So it's a little bit of a vanity metric. And so that's how we could build a larger company and be really busy, but also not be paying yourself or taking on loans to try to grow faster.
And then moving forward, you then also from building a 1 million company to getting published with being read tens of millions of times in places like Times and HBR and Entrepreneur and everything. What did then happen? Did this help you, these like proof stamps of credibility in time and so on, to get you other gigs and to write books and everything?
I haven't really tried to get speaking engagements or write a book. So I have literary agents have reached out from the writing though. But for me, writing and teaching are the main things that I want to do. And I feel like, there's a lot of things like speaking, you see a high dollar amount, let's say you're getting paid $10,000 per speech, but it's like a business like anything else. So, it takes time to build your reputation. If you have a speech, refine the speech to get it really good. So I just have really tried to focus on what I enjoy the most and works financially.
Yeah, I love this. So that you really stay true to yourself. And do you sometimes still write for Forbes or another media outlet?
I haven't written for a media outlet for probably like 6 years.
I'd love to learn more about how you approach learning, which role learning plays in your life.
Yeah, well, I feel like a lot of these things, even writing and crafts, you can look at them from so many different angles. You could look at them from like, what are the best hacks? What are the best systems of combinations of hacks? What are the best frameworks or paradigms? And each of those have different leverage points. Most things focus on hacks. Like, you probably heard the thing of like culture eats strategy for breakfast kind of things of like, where's the leverage? And so I think a lot for me stems from a certain paradigm that I'm in. So I mentioned, and we just go through these paradigms in childhood, and most people don't realize the paradigms in adulthood, that they're actually sequential because one builds upon the other. One paradigm is not better. It just enables or allows certain things or feels like a better fit. And they're predictable. There's a huge amount of variety in humans, but the stages are actually pretty predictable. And so I found it really helpful to understand what stage I'm in and where I've been. Also, just I love like YouTube things where it's just like you're interviewing someone who's 80 or 70 in their life lessons and what is important at them. So I think for me, I would describe this my paradigm is just fundamentally different. So let's say and I'm sharing this because it puts learning at the center and growth, and that then leads to everything else. I mentioned that over time, going from external to internally oriented and giving myself permission to do things that I enjoy doing that make me feel alive purely because they make me feel alive, like choosing article topics that I'm curious about versus like what's going to help to make the most money in the shortest period of time. And over time, I can saw that if you set a goal, you're kind of saying, okay, out of all the different futures, I want this future. And I'm going to create based on and you're creating that goal based on what's valuable to you right now. And then you're going to create a strategy of, okay, what's the most direct path to that goal? So if it's 1 million followers, you're going to set arbitrary timelines. Like in a year, I want to be here. In 2 years, I want to be here. And then from the strategy, you might create short-term goals. Then you might have your day's tasks. And then kind of the goal is to work as hard as you can and be efficient as possible in any given day on the things that will lead to your goal. And 100%, that approach, I think, will lead you to do better in that goal, especially in the short term, because you're kind of going to reality and saying, hey, ignore lots of anything that's not related, obviously related to this thing. But I feel like reality is so much more rich and interesting than that and dynamic. In other words, let's say I have a goal in a year and I set for my 2 year in 2 years. Well, in a half a year, in a year, like my values are constantly changing. What's important, the constellation of what's important and how they're important are constantly changing. And so I like responding to what I really find valuable in the moment or in that period of time, not what I committed to. And then number two, it's just so complex moment to moment. So I felt it a lot more when I became a parent. I have this achiever mindset, I got to achieve these goals. And as you know, then it's like, all right, there's a baby who wants to spend time with you, but you had this high priority task. It creates this tension and conflict within yourself. And then you feel like, well, I'm behind being a parent. And I wanted to reach this financial goal in a year, but now I'm behind that. And it seems like other people are going faster because they don't have kids, or other parents are doing a better job because they're just being a parent. And so it kind of like just didn't feel good to constantly be questioning yourself of like, I'm behind where I should be. And I feel like I'm sacrificing these quality moments because of this conflict. In each moment is really special. Like we're in the exact right place we should be. And there's incredible learning and growth and opportunities to experience it. Even difficult, bittersweet moments are beautiful. And so in that context, every moment is a teacher. I personally enjoy kind of surfing on the edge of what's just happening on the moment and all the competing things of ourselves and the world, and noticing what arises in me or others and appreciating that and learning from that as well. From that perspective, there's just so many learning opportunities every single day that tension happens. Normally we might walk over it if our goal is, okay, I need to get this financial goal in a certain period of time. But if we're looking at it holistically, this tension comes up or is a weird conversation with someone, it actually, from a learning perspective, that's a great time to learn when it's still fresh for you, you're processing. And there's often a deeper lesson. If you learn that lesson, suddenly it might allow you to collaborate with people better or be a better communicator. And that's going to reverberate throughout your entire life in ways that are hard to predict. And you may not know where exactly you're going because you're not fixated. But in my experience, the journey to wherever you go is more enjoyable. You learn more and you connect with people more because you're not looking at people based on how they relate to your goal, but just more in the moment. The place you're going to end up in is probably much more interesting than you could have even imagined, your past self could have imagined at that time.
How do you cope with this feeling? What's your strategy for this with your kids? Now your kids are older. You told me about your kids. Still, I'd like to know more about how to cope with such an internal conflict situation.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that one area of research that I came into was this idea of integrative complexity that I was researching. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, he wrote the book Flow. He also wrote a book called Creativity. And he'd spent his whole career studying the most creative people and found that they often had this integrative complexity. They have these parts that would normally be in different people and in the same person. So that naturally creates a tension. And then Ray Dalio, he wrote Principles, billionaire, entrepreneur, investor. He also he did this study where he interviewed Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, gave them all personality profiles. And he found that one of the 7 qualities they all had was this idea of integrative complexity. So they might be a visionary and very detail oriented. They might be good at thinking to the far future and then exactly what needs to get done now. They might be very confident, but also extremely humble as well. This is also a quality of adult development that as we get more, go through, it's like we have more parts and we can hold contradictions. We don't have to just, okay, I'm just this side or I'm that side, not black and white. It's like, okay, these two opposing things, they can be in there. So I think reading about that, reading about that, number one, I used to feel like something is wrong with me because I'm like always having like these internal conflicts. I'm waiting for this point in life where it's like, okay, I have everything figured out and I can be more peaceful. And I kind of feel like it's just actually fundamentally actually good to have it if you're kind of looking at it as to create this tension between maybe we're writing on Substack and part of us is an artist, another part is an entrepreneur, another part is a scientist, another part's a journalist or a marketer, and exposing ourselves to try to hold all of those. Any of these groups individually might even hate each other or look down on each other, and to hold them all is a superpower. So I do look at it like that, fundamentally. And then I guess also say it doesn't take it away, that, okay, I feel this and it's uncomfortable to feel this attention, but it does give it a different context and meaning, which is really feels special, makes it meaningful. And then I also say it's just hard. I notice in our family, I don't know, it might be a genetic thing. Like my son, he can be very focused on anything. Like he's teaching himself chess, playing a computer game. He's gone through periods where he's doing like a month-long competition. He'll set the alarm for 7 a.m. and then go until 12 p.m. And like he is just super. We walk into the room and there's already a little bit of frustration because he's clicking. He knows how to like click the mouse like 15 times a second, and like he's just super focused. And so it's harder. And he had this challenge in school where it was harder for him. Okay, we're doing 40 minutes in a session. Okay, kid, let's go over here. He just wouldn't go. So school fundamentally didn't work. And then my wife is, I would say, very good at going in between things. If something comes up, shifting, not to say it feels comfortable, but she's much more able to do it and always has been. And I'm somewhere in the between. So it's part of me wonders if it's genetic on some level as well.
Your boy is then, would you call it like a flow state or so that he doesn't want to leave this flow state where he's in?
Yeah, it could be a flow state. It could be like even before computer games, he just gets into something. And then like, for example, when he started writing, he started to write late and things like that, but then he got into it and like suddenly he actually started writing books. Like he was working on 8 books at once. They're like dozens of pages long, and like every second he's using it. And that's not something that we've purposely not pushed him, but everything is self-generated. So it also helps me to see sometimes we beat ourselves up, but it feels like there is a genetic wiring where both kids are just very different on that example.
Wow. Talking about writing, that writing helps you learn more deeply. This is called the explanation effect. And I know that it also helps to maximize your return on learning by helping you build an audience and get a recognized expert in your niche. Could you elaborate on this explanation effect a bit more?
Yeah, it's a lot of things that we already feel intuitively. Like you're writing something out and then suddenly it's like you're just thinking it feels good, like you processed an emotion that you had and made sense, contextualized it, or a thought was fuzzy or you had an idea and suddenly it's really clear. And so I was noticing that and I just started to explore it. There's actually a fair amount of research on it. Number one, when we learn something with the intention to teach, I think that's actually the academic term for it. We actually learn it differently because, okay, we're going to have to teach this to other people. So I kind of actually approach every area of my life that way. I don't know what I'm going to teach in the future, but I am writing about the stuff that I learn. So I kind of feel like if I'm having a conversation with my kids and I'm learning something, or I don't know, at the beach or in the water doing a cold plunge, I could learn. So it's like everything is material. And so it actually fundamentally changes the engagement with life, actually. And then I would say a second thing is it puts your subconscious mind to work. So we've all, had some public speaking in our life, even if it's just speaking in front of a class, probably. And I don't know about you, but I was always really nervous before those. And like my subconscious mind was thinking about it. So it's like the nights beforehand, I'm having dreams about speaking, but it kind of shows that it pushes our mind to automatically just think about learning and processing these things. We don't know a lot about the subconscious mind, but we know it's pretty powerful. And so that's even before the thing. Another thing is when we're teaching something or sharing something, we're externalizing it. So we can actually see it like someone else would see it. And we can more easily see the holes in our logic or something's not interesting. I don't know if you've ever been talking to someone, you start sharing something, and then part of the way through, you're just like, it's not even worth sharing this. It's not that interesting. Or you're talking about something, it's like, actually, is that really true? So it's just this, you could have it if you're writing. Another thing is you could have it through different mediums. It shows up differently. So talking one-on-one about an idea with one person, you might get an insight versus the other, you might get a completely different insight because we have this ability to automatically customize what we're saying for the person that we're talking to on the fly. And so different things will come out that will even surprise us. And then when we're writing, that's the best for the most nuanced. You really have to write everything out and think everything out. So you'll get more nuanced, more complex thoughts that way. And, if you write on let's see, like this size is 8.5, 5.5 by 8.5 versus 8.5 by 11.
Makes a difference.
And this is just another sheet somewhere over there that has 11 by 14, and I have a whiteboard over here. As I have a voice recorder called the Day One app. So I call that the full spectrum effect, that it's not just, which is better? Should I do online or offline or audio or text? They all provide unique things. So just kind of try to do the ones, make them all part of your lifestyle so you use the right ones in the right moment. And actually, I'll just say the final thing. So I kind of talking about it, what you get before you actually share it, just the learning before. As you're sharing, you get insights. And then the final thing would be, I think the technical term is like knowledge transformation. When you're taking what you've learned and trying to put it into words, you're actually transforming the knowledge. It's kind of like sometimes I liken learning to digestion. You don't just get the value of the food by looking at it. You have to chew it, process it, and same with learning. So by teaching others, it's just you're processing the knowledge, putting your own words, putting it into your own schemas, connecting it to experiences you've had or other ideas you already have. And then finally, it's once you put something out to the public, then other people read it and they're going to engage with it and give you feedback, tell you what you liked or not. You're going to see the stats on it. And that will then drive more evolution on it as well.
Hungry for more? Inside my online writing club, I help you start, grow, and monetize your writing. Join the fun and 8,000 like-minded writers right now. What you shared is you think that top performers learn together and only amateurs learn alone, Would this be something, this reminds me of a mastermind, why masterminds are so important. Do you recommend others to connect with others and also top performers to learn together? Or what is with newbies? Do you recommend that newbies connect with other newbies?
I forget who shared this rule, but having like a ratio, like a 1-to-1 ratio of like mentors to peers to mentees, I think you offer benefits to each. I think when you have a mentee, it might be a little bit more you focused, where you can be teaching and learning as you teach. And just when a beginner asks questions, it forces you to reconsider some things that might have been automated for you and do better there. And then with peers, you're kind of on the same level, so it's much closer to a friendship. And then with mentors, you're obviously, they're the expert more and you're being taught more, but you're also helping them in the same way a mentee helps a mentor. So I think that works really well. And in terms of a mentor, some different ways to go there is, one is even just paying for people's time. Even a 15-minute conversation, if you've really researched the person, read their writing, and it's just a laser focused on a few questions, that could be really transformative. Even if the person, let's say, is charging $200 per hour, and then you could pay $50 for a quarter of an hour, that's actually a really good deal. And that's helpful if you're in a network or you live in a country or area where it's harder. It'd be hard to get someone's time who's, they're really much more progressed along their career. So that's one way, is just, you could just get in the door, ask the questions you want. Another way is just finding people whose writing you really, really enjoy and focusing on them. So not trying to, let's say, comment on everyone, but who are the people that you authentically would read their stuff anyway. And so I think that was a mistake I made early on, was that I was like, okay, this person's successful. Let me try to go up to them and get them to be my mentor. And when you're getting advice from someone, you're not just getting tactics. You're actually getting a whole paradigm or worldview. And so all the things, the shadow parts that you may not want to copy, you're actually copying that. Or if they have a hack, but it comes from a certain perspective that's not aligned with your style, it may not actually be helpful, even though it's good advice. It's just not good advice for you. So that's why it's really good to find people you resonate with. And you're going to interact with those people. You're going to be more authentic, and it's actually going to be easier to build a relationship. And then with peers, a few things that I've done, I've organized probably like 40 dinners over the years and probably about 20 weekend retreats and done a lot of many hundreds of one-on-one calls. So reaching out to people and connecting with people, helping people, convening people is really powerful.
And I also know that if you say you want to grow to the next level, then one learning challenge can change your life forever. This is what you say. You can train like a Navy SEAL, or you can write a book in a month, or you can start writing for 30 days on Substack notes. So what's your opinion on learning challenges? Because they are everywhere. And is this something that you recommend?
I used to be very much in the marathon camp, like just do something sustainable, get a little bit better each day. And then a friend who's very direct and one of these peer mentors people told me, and from the Netherlands, not too far away from you, was saying that I was just being black or white thinking, that sometimes it is really valuable to intensively try something. Maybe it's not sustainable. You don't want to live in this world, but it is enough to get you to try something new, go outside your comfort zone. And actually, I agree with that. So I think I've gone too far where I've gone like hardcore sprinting all the time. And that's how I got burned out. And there's a feeling like, okay, I have to, these next 3 months are important. I just got to be really focused, not do anything else. And then of course I'm really focused, and then it's just 6 months or something like that. So I have really eliminated that for my life, of because you could get into these chronic sprints. But I think a sprint once in a while to expand as a human is great.
And I know that in regard to learning and embracing this power of learning and growing with others, you also said that there are two questions you should ask yourself. Who should I surround myself with, and what format would bring out our best? Could you elaborate on this a bit more?
It kind of goes back to your question about learning, is how do you get good at something? One approach is, you focus on the hacks of it. And I think another is, how do you create an environment or a lifestyle that automatically creates these things? And so, I mentioned earlier about a learning lifestyle of having learning. What if learning was a top value? And then you're going throughout the day and noticing learning opportunities, even the small ones, and processing them. How much of a difference would that make in your life over 10 years, 20 years of all those little things you're processing, versus someone who's just overriding those in the short term would be more efficient because they're getting through their to-do list more effectively, but they might be missing these fundamental lessons that hurt them or improve their quality of life. And then I feel like relationships are kind of similar. How do you create a context, in any situation, let's say you and I, there's areas of overlap and there's ways of collaborating that could be the most fulfilling or rewarding or impactful. And so I feel like there's an exploration of that. So this is we had one conversation, and then you're kind enough to be interviewed on SubStack Campfire, and then we're having it here. So I like kind of when I meeting someone, having an open, that there's some way we could help each other or collaborate or support each other. And as I have conversations with them and learn more about them, then I'm thinking about, okay, well, what's the highest thing we could collaborate on?
How do you see this learning experience at the moment on Notes, also combined or linked to your Campfire you're offering?
Well, I feel like with Notes, I'm not necessarily going there to learn as much as to connect. And I'm not going there to broadcast to lots of people as much as to connect with a few people. And so I feel like, actually I have an article on this, not to use another term, but junk learning, that, we're now 20 years into social media revolution. and we have all these algorithms, and typically they sort by recency, what has been published in the last day, and they sort by what's most popular, what are people most engaging with, and then also based on what you've liked in the past. And if you were to think from scratch about how would you build a learning algorithm, like imagine social media with just a learning algorithm, and the most learning per unit of time, you might want what's the best thing of all time on something. And not always, sometimes you want the most up-to-date things, but you think about what's the best of all time, and you wouldn't just think, what's the most popular, you think what's the most rare, like what's the most important thing that's no one's talking about. Because if you focus on that, you're going to have more unique things to write about. If you're reading the most popular things that everyone already knows about, the things you're going to write about are things people already know about. So it's going to be hard to separate yourself that way. And then if you're thinking about, if you're just dividing all the information in the world to what are things I already know and what are the things I don't know, per unit of time, you're probably going to get more learning from, if you're a very rational person or cognitive, going to the emotional side. If you're it's like almost, it provides more of like a hybrid vigor. And social media is like, okay, you're going to get, if you like a certain Democratic Party or Republican or whatever it is in your country, you're going to get more content like that already confirming what you already believe. So that's why I don't necessarily look to like Substack Notes or any social media aspect for learning. I kind of want to go to like who's the best in that way, that particular area, and what's the best thing that they've ever published. I think that's the power of the internet, is you can actually get that. But what I think is really, really amazing about Notes, which is, I love it, is I think it creates a space where I can more experiment that's connected to my publication. So I love trying on different ways of writing and trying out different ideas and seeing what resonates. And I love kind of celebrating other people's work or what they're doing on Substack and building one-on-one relationships that we could be collaborative with each other in the future.
Could you share a bit more about what pillars you now have in your business and how much money you're building with this? Because I read that this whole thing with online courses, for instance, that led to over 7 figures at some point. Is it still that big, your business that is more focused on values and really taking the time and everything? Or is it that you say it used to be that big, but now it's smaller because, I changed. Now I'm in my 40s. I learned so many things similar to Michael Thompson.
It's definitely smaller revenue-wise, but higher profit-wise. And the main things that I do are Substack, the paid newsletter, right now has about basically a little over $60,000 a year revenue from that. I guess Medium takes, or again, Substack takes some. And then I have a year-long course that in the past I'd aim for about 20 people in each cohort, and I've done about 6 of those. It's a year-long cohort. And then I have a mental model club where it's $20 a month. And so over the years, we've had thousands of people go through it and around 750 paying subscribers for that. Those are the 3 main, and then Substack Campfire as well.
And what are your goals for the next month and let's say until 2026 or so for the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, kind of talking about earlier, I feel like when one is in one approach and then you're kind of going to a new approach, sometimes it's good to go to the other extreme and then find the blend between them. So I mentioned like goals, non-goals. I think goals are great in some places and not in others. I'm kind of in a phase where I'm actually really enjoying not having goals. I did have a goal at the beginning of the newsletter to have 1,000 paying subscribers by the end of the year. Actually, I realized, ironically, I had about that many people sign up, but there's also about 300 something signed out. So it's like creating a goal is interesting. It's like, well, it's not really the most important thing. It's the number of people in, it's the number. But I also think that 1,000 paying subscribers was me kind of falling for the $1 million thing and picking an arbitrary number, an arbitrary timeline. And it's feeling really good at first. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing better. And then I plateaued. And I'm like, okay, now it's like the whole thing is wrong and I gotta fix it. So I kind of just stepping away from that again of like, I'm trying to grow it and I'm experimenting with things to grow it, but I'm not putting a timeline
I see.
And
So
I'm
you now,
also
sorry, Michael, you now have about, I guess, 100,000 subscribers on your list on Substack. Am I right?
free subscribers, about
Yeah,
130,000 free
free.
subscribers,
Again, and paid subscribers? How many paid subscribers do you have?
around 600.
600. Okay. Yeah. And your goal somehow is to reach this milestone of 1,000 paid subscribers and get the orange badge then.
Yes, that was the goal
Was
I
your
started
goal.
with.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd like to get there, but I've also gotten to a place where internally, if I just stay the same level, I'd also be happy. I'm not just optimizing for money or speed of getting there. I'm also optimizing for all these other variables. And another thing that was helpful is, the growth isn't just pure straight up. It's like growth, plateau, growth. So and the growth is often quick because like something really resonates and I do a few articles on it. So if I'm just judging my own like success based off of that, then it just feels kind of bad because most of the time it's in a plateau in the number of subscribers. You're getting people joining, leaving. So, I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. At Substack, when you log in to your thing, the first thing they show you is the number of subscribers. It kind of pushes that way of seeing it, which I don't necessarily like. But my intention is to just grow as much as I can, experiment with what resonates with people, and try out like things with voice or style. And I think the right things will happen at the right time.
So I'm wondering, Michael, did you build your list from scratch or did you build this list based on your multiple, let's say, lead magnets and courses and everything?
Yeah, I've never really had a consistent newsletter, but I did do things where it's like, hey, if you read this article, basically, I'll giving you this thing, a free thing that's also really valuable. I put a lot of time into, and then have people's email. And then when a new article came out a few times a year, I would send an email. So basically, everyone who'd signed up from 2014 is what I uploaded into Substack. So
cool.
some people followed me when I was writing about relationship building, some about learning. So it's different than somebody who started from scratch. I write about this. Here's my niche. And they're probably going to have a higher number of people converting that way.
That's smart that you did this because Michael Thompson, he told me that he somehow missed out on this. I guess then with the lead magnet, this was a great thing to do that whenever you got published in Forbes, let's say it, then you had this lead magnet there. Am I right? You had something
Exactly.
there that people would get on your list, which is very, very smart because Michael Thompson said that he missed out on this a bit, although he had like these heydays on Medium and all the other platforms. I think this is something that you have to start with. And I know that you also have like the biggest learning community around the world. You shared somewhere that you have now over 300,000 people in this learning community. Could you share a bit more about this?
That community is not as active anymore. It was on a Facebook group. So at one point it actually was really active, but Facebook was giving more juice to the organic reach on groups. And it's still okay. I also realized that, but it's not nearly as much as it was. Like we were getting like 5,000 to 10,000 new people per week joining the group just by searching learning on Facebook. But I also realized that a lot of the people also weren't super targeted for the people that I work with. So in the great purge of trying to stay focused, I actually haven't been keeping that updated.
I see. So this community is nothing that you focus on right now. This is just, a number somewhere on the internet then.
Yeah, I'm curious about it. I haven't looked at it for a while, but I'm gone on Facebook for a while.
One idea would be that you would go there in your Facebook group and that you're telling them that you're on Substack or something, because there would still be this overlap.
Yeah, I think I could do that. Could have done that more. But also, Sarah Fay spoke in our Substack campfire this morning. She said something interesting she said it sounded much more cool, but it's like you should either be everywhere or just one place. She was saying that she just didn't like the feeling of being everywhere. And when I tune in for myself, although it sounds simple, take a piece of content and then put it everywhere, I don't really enjoy, it's technically the most efficient, but I kind of just right now just focusing on Substack. And if I feel like I have more bandwidth, then I would really post on LinkedIn again. And I post everywhere, but I just haven't felt compelled to do it.
I read about your 80-20 rule on learning and that you can also apply this to relationships and everything and writing. Yeah, what is this 80-20 rule all about?
Well, in a lot of domains, there's 20% of the inputs create 80% of the outputs or the results, or 20% of the people cause 80% of your happiness, or something like that. Or 20% of your clients cause 80% of your profit. So, and then even within that, depending on the domain, there's often a dynamic where it's like within the 80-20, there's another 80-20 where 4% of people cause 64, or there could be 1% causes 52%, something like that. So it's like, how do you get more leverage with your time? And one way of doing that is just, for example, when I was focusing on one point, I love connecting with people, but I was just connecting with too many people. And some people I was just staying in touch with, but I wasn't really vibing with them. I was just like, okay, I should stay in touch with them, or I should remember their birthdays, or things like that. And it was just feeling like it was running me rather than I was running it. And so I made the decision of like, okay, who are the people that I most want to connect with? And then how do I put more energy in those people? And so that's when I kind of had this criteria, which I think is actually pretty universal if you want to build relationship with co-learners. One is a connection. You have a connection with the people and chemistry. Two is vulnerability, that each of you are just posturing to each other. You're willing to share things that are coming up with you in real life, because we all have challenges. Number three is giving. Like you're just naturally, you almost want to give more than you receive. So then you're almost like each competing to give to each other. Versus if you're giving to a taker, ultimately it'll burn you out and make you feel unappreciated. And then a lot of people aren't super active learners. So at first you have, like, when you first meet them, you have this huge learning because you're meeting up the minds, they're teaching you things they know. But then it kind of plateaus where it's like you're still friends with them, but you're just not learning as much. So I thought, well, who are the people that are hardcore? They have learning as a high value as well. Then it feels, whenever I'm catching up with them, it's almost like meeting a new person. And one of my friends, he was an entrepreneur. He raised $32 million for his company. He exited it. And then he's basically been a full-time learner for the past 10 years. Like, he travels around with his girlfriend and his brother full-time, living out of Airbnbs and doing stuff. He basically, like, he gets up at 5 a.m., reads for a few hours. Him and his brother talk about what they learned, and it's like more learning. It's like, imagine if like learning was a sport, where it's like he does that, and then he's like, he ends the day with hours of reading. Over dinner, everyone's talking about what they learned. Some people, we just love learning and growing and exploring that, learning with other people. My point is, if I haven't talked with him for 2 months, he might have already gone through the equivalent of like a degree in something. Like, literally, like, he like studied for like the first year of medical school, and like did that in a few months. So I feel like that way you get the benefits of deep relationship with someone and the benefits of a diverse relationship where you're learning a lot rather than it being separate. And then another thing I love is people who are good at teaching what they learn, because a lot of people learn and they can put it into practice, but it's really hard for them to translate it to others, versus someone who could almost like teach you what they're learning. You're just going to get more from it, and vice versa. And then I'd say the third, another good thing is someone who can apply what they're learning and get results. So that way they're able to explain things not just theoretically, but they're like, okay, if you want the result, I've done all this experimentation. Here's how you get the result from it. The final thing would be polymath, that someone who's like, one of the benefits of having a large network is people across different fields rather than just in your field. But again, if somebody's in different fields, they cancel out the blind spots of every field. But if you have that all in one person, now just maintaining a few deep relationships is much more organic. Sending, voice messages to each other throughout the day. That's one way I've applied that to relationships. And there's only a few people in my life that fit that criteria. That was a very long-winded response. And that's one paradigm of, like, you're going to a system and trying to find the leverage points. There's also the opposite paradigm, which is true, which is holistic paradigm, that there's a set of elements creating anything, and it's their interaction of those elements that has a multiplicative effect. 1 plus 1 equals 10. And so it's also helpful as a frame to look for those multipliers.
Did you say, I love Christina and the Online Writing Club interviews? If that sounds like you, please consider rating and reviewing my show. This helps me support more writers just like you move forward the writing life and business that they desire and deserve. And now, Michael, let's do our rapid fire questions here. You know about our mutual friend, Veronica Jocker-Smith, and her Substack newsletter, The Lemon Tree Mindset. And we were talking about a lot about mental models today. If I tell you, you should open a new Substack publication and you should name it after a specific mental model, which mental model would you pick and why?
I think what's most powerful at each moment, it changes. I'll just say the first thing that came to my mind is paradigm shifts. So every mental model changes as I evolve, what I find highest leverage. So for a long time, it was the 80-20 rule. But I think a lot in paradigms now. And when is a paradigm shift about to happen? And what is a paradigm? Because it's often, you can think about a paradigm as the water you're swimming in that is, determining so much of your reality, but you don't even see it. If you can see the water you're swimming in, you could then challenge certain assumptions or things like that. Be more creative.
And I know that you now play a specific sport. Let's call it like this. What is it? Because you told me about this, and I saw a picture where you were like this tall, and then your friend was like this, your Asian friend, and I was like, wow,
he's not actually pretty tall too. He's not short. I'm just tall. I'm 6'6".
Exactly this. Yeah, you're pretty tall.
Yeah, I've become a really big fan of pickleball this past year, and I love it as an area, something I enjoy. Just even it almost has no innate meaning in the sense of we're hitting around wiffle balls basically with small paddles, but I really enjoy creating a space in my life to play it. Now the kids are a little bit older, they want to hang out with their friends, and I just love, it's a very social sport. So just meeting people, a lot of people I play with are 50s or 60s, mostly 50s, 60s, sometimes even 70s. So I love that aspect to it. And, I study learning. So I feel like it's just been a fun area to really analyze my own learning through it. And I look at it at every level. So I could go on for just a long time on analyzing the learning from pickleball perspective.
Yeah, and I know that you moved to a new place. Is this the place where you think you'd also want to die? Because I know from Michael Thompson that he found the place where he'd also want to die. Do you think that you came to the place where you want to die?
I don't think I don't feel like I'm the type of person who would ever say I found the place, in the sense, just part of my personality and DNA is I love leaving open the space for reinvention and being completely surprised. And so that's why I don't have any tattoos either.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what I can.
But I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's just how I'm wired. I love trying things out, basically.
Yeah. So
and I'm surprised by how I change.
How much time per month do you spend reading books or reading in general?
Yeah, I'd say this point, the past few months has been a little bit different because I've been more doing social learning, like connecting with a lot of people one-on-one. And I think the things you learn in books are things different than things you learn with other people. And it's different than things that are more emotional, somatic, that kind of bubble up intuitively and that you process. So they're all really cool ways of learning that combine really well as well. But I would say after around 2014, when I started writing these blockbuster articles, I decided to do a format that 80% of my time was spent learning. So I like the idea of spending most of my time doing that. So on average, it's probably 4 hours per day in some form of deliberate learning for the past 10 years. And that's really transformative. I feel like there's so many areas of life, like this has been across dozens of fields. So many fields I didn't even know existed, and people working decades to understand certain phenomenon and create models of how things work that are very relevant out to broader people, but haven't just been explained well. So I feel like the world I'm inside of in my own head is just so much different because I've put in that time.
Yeah, and we heard so many popular names here with Newport and with Clear and everything. Who would you like to meet in your life in the next years? Who do you like to meet? Maybe someone from the Substack universe or someone from outside the universe?
Yeah, I don't really have anyone. I feel like, I don't know, because I might have had someone in the past. I feel like the differences are you can really meet so many people that you admire through their podcasts or their writing. And sometimes I don't even like it's saying, don't meet your heroes. So I have a lot of people that I admire, but I don't have like one person that I'm dying to meet. One joy is that in my year-long cohort, I really get to know people. And there's people that I've really kept in touch with and we become friends. I love exchanging voice notes. And I love people who love talking about things they're learning, things they're experiencing in life, how they're evolving, or even if people who have ideas about things and wanting, oh, this idea I'm excited about. What do you think? So I have a fair, not a huge number, but let's say 5 to 10 people, maybe 15, where we're just exchanging voice notes every day and processing. So I find that even though I'm in New Hampshire and not close to anyone, I love voice notes as a way to connect with people.
This was really an insightful and value-packed interview. We covered so many things, many personal anecdotes, as well as so many, mental models and everything. I thank you so much for being here today with us. And if someone, and I guess so many, will fall in love with you while watching this interview or you're listening to this interview, how can those people connect with you? What's the best place to meet you?
My newsletter is called Blockbuster Blueprint. So it's blockbuster.thoughtleader.school. So that would be the best place. And there, I typically write about learning, mental models, thought leadership, personal growth topics, and kind of try to blend just really deep research that I've gone really deep, spend dozens of hours on a topic, and then bringing you back the nuggets, but also just sharing my journey of learning it, where my insights were. And then the other place would be Substack Campfire. There's a program that Tom Kugler and I started just a few months ago. Literally, we're in the middle of our first cohort. We met each other only a few months ago. And this is designed as a place for people who are newer to Substack to get connected to a community and to practice sharing in a safe, authentic space. Sometimes when you're on social media, you come onto a new platform, you're not sure of the norms, and you just post something and maybe it's a little vulnerable and then no one comments on it. It's not a good feeling. And you're like, all right, I'm just not going to do this. Where I think what we're creating is just a community of people who are just really good writers, actually, often. Like the stories are really interesting to read, and people supporting each other, cheering for each other, helping each other in the context of notes. So every day during the challenge, people write one note per day. And then we also have guest interviews. You were kind enough to interview Sarah Fay. Gurwinder was another person, one of the top notes creators on the platform.
And Michael, I thank you so much for the interview. It was delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. You're awesome.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and like this episode. Extra credits. Tell me in the comments what you like best about today's show.